There we go.
All right.
We're live, and Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome to the first Aether TST meeting of 2023. Let me pull up the Aether TST notes. All right. So what I'd like to cover today is three topics, and people can feel free to add into the Aether TST running meeting notes. Sean, Amit, and Jordan have done some work between the last meeting and this meeting around the Atomics gRPC enhancements, and have laid out a number of changes that are proposed. Would appreciate an update from them. I'll provide an update, and Scott and I can provide an update on the release discussion that we had also. And I'd like to cover the Aether TST meeting schedule as a discussion point afterwards. Any other items that we need to add? All right. If not, then I'll turn it over to Sean, Amit, and Jordan. You guys provide an update on the Atomics gRPC enhancements?
Hey, Siva, you hear me okay?
Hear you fine, thank you.
Yeah, so I was just gonna bring up that document, but I think you have it open there, your third last tab.
I might. Hang on a second. Let's just see if I can navigate around here and get rid of this.
Yeah.
This one here?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, so I have
Okay.
an order of execution on the menu on the left.
Outline, order of execution. All right.
Uh,
Is that what you want to go through, or do you want to?
Yeah. Actually, scroll up a bit. I'm not sure if you have you synced this recently. Oh yeah, I think this is okay.
Yeah. Well, let's go through the solutions themselves.
Yeah. So you know, we had meetings between you know, the technical team and you know, we suggested a few things, and I had a discussion with Siva about them before the break, and just quickly want to you know, have a summary of them here. So basically, first was to limit the size of a transaction, right? So a transaction previously could be across many targets, and in the world of Aether, that would mean many enterprises. So this really isn't necessary when we looked at the use cases. So basically what we're going to do is say a transaction can only be for one enterprise at a time, and also we're going to have some kind of a limit in there as well if the transaction exceeds a certain size, for instance, like, I don't know, 100K or something like this, and we'll base that off the number of paths and values, then we'll just reject it. Okay, so that's a pretty simple implementation to do. The second one was about the configuration store, and Jordan has a prototype of that up, and I think he wanted to, he said he was going to send an email to the, you know, Amit and basically GS Labs, I guess, to ask them to try out this. And basically what it does, it changes around the configuration store, and simply put, it removes the limitation, you know, that was there previously with gRPC. So basically, the path and values will be stored individually in Atomics rather than storing 1,000 path values in one configuration. So hopefully that should alleviate some of the problems too. The other thing we were looking at was this direct import and
So
export of
Sean,
configuration.
on number 2, is this something we can try out in-house at Intel as well? Jordan's patch?
Yeah, in theory it is, Scott. Yeah, we need to put the effort into creating a scaled test. Currently, we don't have scripts to push the system to the limit, but that is something, yes, we could do internally.
Yeah, I'll think about putting that on our agenda.
Okay. Third one, yeah. So if you're limiting the size of transaction, now you have two options. So you can, break your transaction up into smaller chunks, or in the long term, what we'll have is we'll have a direct import export of configuration. That will accept large size configurations. So basically that's bypassing the transaction system to get your initial configuration in. The item 4 was subscribe once on the GNMI northbound. So that's something that basically allows you deal with getting large configurations out of the system. That's again a programming task inside honest config to implement this subscribe method, and it's once option. We'll cover that in the priority list. 5 is make the gRPC interface to the model plugin use chunking, and that's something I was going to tackle myself. The message is gRPC, and currently it's passing over a big blob, and that can exceed the 4 megabyte limit. But because it's an internal interface, it won't break anything to change that to use chunking. Can you scroll down to 6, please? Yeah. So let me see. So then, in the configuration that we have big configurations, but also within it, in places, we have big lists. And big lists, for instance, in Aether can be of SIMs. So for one enterprise, we might have a device group, and that device group might have 10,000 SIMs in it. So like we don't have a method for doing a GNMI get on big SIMs or big lists like this without breaking. So we would need to add paging and sorting there. Well, actually, yeah, I just a kind of a nuance on this. This kind of can be alleviated a bit through the subscribe once, but like we would like to have sorting or paging and sorting on it to help the GUI, not to have to receive 10,000 SIMs. That's really the problem this one is solving. 7 was change southbound to have an alternate method to GNMI set. So basically, the last remaining bottleneck in the system then is the southbound GNMI connection. And basically, for the adapter, like SD core adapter, we could have something other than GNMI set. We could have a customized GNMI set that allows a configuration bigger than 4 megabytes. But for the meantime, I mean, we could put the Band-Aid on this and just increase the 4 megabyte limit. And then 8 was putting scalability tests in place and doing things like fuzzing and having proper scalability approach to ROC. And 9 was adding tools to diagnose and recover atomic stores, and that's something we discussed in this meeting previously. That a lot of the problems we've had and GS Labs have had has been to do with replica corruption. How do we recognize this? How do we replace it? And this is just putting it on the wanted list that we want tools to do all of this and back up logs and a lot more understanding of how this thing works. So you can go to the order of execution then. So let me see. So the first thing to do, I think, is item number 2. That's impose the restriction on transaction. Sorry, 2 was change the size. Oh yeah, change the size of configuration store. That's the one Jordan has implemented, right? So that was
Yep.
the first one to try, right? Then 7 is the next bottleneck, which was the southbound, and that was the one. We can put a Band-Aid in there, increasing it to 20 megabytes or something like this, but also we want to tackle this in the first quarter of this year.
So
Item
Sean,
number
a question on number 7. It's described as adding like an alternate method to do this for large transfers.
Mhm.
Why not make this the primary method and it can be used for all transfers?
You could do that as well.
I mean, I guess one thing I don't like is having 2 different ways to do something. I mean, I know we're like walking away from GNMI to do this, but if we need to implement this anyway, and then we've needed to walk away from GNMI anyway, and make it the primary method. Just a thought.
Yeah. I mean, my idea on it is that we wouldn't abandon GNMI. The payload would still be those GNMI paths and elements. That this would really just be a set using chunking.
Right.
So it would be, but you're right. Yeah, we could use this as the only method that we used southbound.
Because every adapter is going to have to support this, at least any adapter that
Yeah.
can take a large configuration.
Yeah, no, this is true. Yeah, so yeah, we could use this for the main method for getting to adapters.
I also think when you start getting into the replication corruption, you might find that that's the path you want to take anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Using the one new method only. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, you might find that you need a new method so that you can handle the replication corruption or something of that nature.
Fair point. This could end up being a question of timing. We may put in a separate method quickly, but deprecate an old method in a follow-on release, so that we don't have to change everything all at once.
Yeah,
It limits the scope of impact initially.
Yeah,
I
mean,
guess I was just gonna say one concern I suppose with deprecating it, sort of walking back my suggestion, is that ONOS config is able to talk to GNMI devices directly. And those devices we don't control the implementation of, and we could not just tell them they're going to listen to the new method only. So we may need to keep around, the GNMI specification, the standard one for those legacy devices, and stipulate that they can't have large configurations. I think those that did need to use the standard would not have large configurations by their nature.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could easily set a flag in ONOS config that said, look, this type of device, is an adapter, and therefore it uses the streaming set, whereas other ones don't, and they can use a standard set.
Yeah. It could be a flag in topo. Maybe we've got some other target related stuff there.
Yeah, or even in the model, model info, where we define the metadata. So something like that will allow us flexibility in that. We're not going to burn all our bridges.
Yeah, but I think all adapters should probably move to this, and then legacy devices could continue to use the old one.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then we can also make a more conscious decision around when to deprecate, if indeed we need to deprecate it, so that we only have one. But I don't think we make it under the urgent need to fix some of these limitations.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Let me see. 5. Right. So one, sorry, was the next priority, and that was about basically limiting the size of transaction, and that's something that I'm going to put in myself for this current sprint. That's pretty easy, straightforward to do. 5. Can you just scroll back up to 5?
So make the gRPC interface model plugin.
Oh
using
yeah,
chunking.
yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I probably will tackle that as well myself. Let me see. 6.
Support paging and sorting.
Yeah.
So that's more related to the UI, and you had suggested maybe bundling that with number 4.
Yeah. 4 is the subscribe once. Yeah, I think subscribe once is something that can be tackled this quarter as well. So what I think I'll do is, that's something that Adib was interested in doing, and I know Thomas is looking at the item number 3. So I think we basically have to take this away internally, put all of these items, into Jira, and see who can tackle what, and which which ones of them we can do. But I think we should be able to get most of these things done in Q1 of this year. I don't know, Scott, you're probably more in touch with what resources we have and what a priority this is.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I think we should aim for Q1.
Right.
At least for the important things, to resolve these bottlenecks, and also to implement more testing as well of the scalability. So I think you're right, Sean. These things need to get solved soon.
Yeah. So the question is whether these should be in Jira in ONF or whether they should be in Jira in Intel. I mean, are we going to get some help from ONF people?
Yeah,
Well,
I mean, the answer may be both.
Right.
Yeah, from a tracking purpose, I don't know that it probably matters in terms of visibility overall to the community, because I'm not sure that anybody will be able to see an Intel Jira instance.
No.
So I think if we have it in the ONF Jira instance, at least then we all have visibility to the items. But then we can take the resourcing as a separate issue as to which portions are going to be covered by existing folks like yourself and Jordan, and where we're going to pull in other resources. Some of that depends on the scoping as well.
Yeah.
Right? How big are they, and what skills are needed? Because we can't just throw random individuals at this stuff.
No, indeed. Yeah. And I mean, I think there's certain of these items. I mean, for instance, like the scalability tests, I think are probably a good candidate maybe for ONF to tackle. And we have a testing framework, and this is a set of skills that don't require intimate knowledge of the internal coding of honest config, but it's something that could help us a lot.
Agreed. Yep, that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So I mean, I think between in terms of, that was number 8, I think. If you guys were able to do that scalability test and fuzzing and various other things like this, I mean, it's something that would be in the open source repo on the public Jenkins, and it's something that anyone internal or external then that would make a change could benefit from those.
agreed. Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. Not sure the answer to it yet or how we do it, but I agree in principle that it makes sense to be done there.
Okay. Okay. And then for the remaining ones, I mean, yeah, we've covered most of them. I think 9 is the you know, the diagnosis and atomic stores, and you know, that's one Jordan is going to work on. He's the expert there. And then 3 was oh yeah, this direct import or export, but I've seen that Thomas has started working on this as well, and you know, that's something that, you know, I think is probably going to be on track to get in Q1 of 23 as well.
Okay. So it sounds like we have a fairly comprehensive plan, and I genuinely appreciate the thorough analysis that that you and others have done, Sean. So thank you very much for walking through that. Any questions or feedback from others, in particular from Khajiit or GS Labs?
No, I'll just echo your same comments, Scott. It's very thorough. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
And on the testing side, I don't know if we have anybody from GS Lab here today. We'll talk to GS Lab about testing, at least on our behalf, that code you checked in.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. Okay. All right. If there's nothing further on this topic, we'll be slipping into it back and forth, because we'll talk about the release discussion, which is somewhat intimately tied. So, you know, and I'll work somewhat in reverse order here a little bit. Whether it's an Aether 3.0 or 2. something, we need to bundle a release around the major enhancements that are coming from the Aether and Atomics and gRPC enhancements. So we'll target that for end of Q1, beginning of Q2 2023. I think the finer details around the date rely a little bit on the next level of detailed investigation and the timing. We also want to make sure that we include specific Aether private configurations as part of our normal deployment process, normal delivery process. And you know, I think what we're looking for here is there anything else that people think need to go into this release? Now, backing up from that, I think there's a need to do some of the urgent changes and some of the short-term changes around Atomics gRPC, and also updating the Aether 2.1 to include the SD Core 2.1 delivery that's already been complete. So that essentially we've got I think of it more of a synchronization point, where Aether is now going to be released as an entity unto itself, incorporating some of the underlying components that have advanced on their own that are used in other types of configurations. Now, this is something I think we'd like to do as soon as possible and include testing of some of the basic configurations. Apologies, I'm in my in-laws house, which has about 300 clocks.
Now, one bullet point on Aether 2.1 that isn't mentioned is this was a significant modeling change from 2.0.
Okay.
Yeah, Sean might remember more about what has changed, but I think this was where we went to 1 target per enterprise. Is that right, Sean?
Yeah, that's correct, Scott.
So yeah, I mean, all of your mega patches and stuff will be different.
And the API will be different.
Yeah, the API. I mean, I'm trying to think of, you know, what concrete impact does this have on you? You know, the sort of configurations you'll use to bootstrap sites will probably be a little bit different. I mean, we've been using 2.1. Did we use 2.1 in our recent demo internally, Sean? Do you remember?
Question for Badri, I'd say.
I think
Yeah.
we did, yes.
Okay, so we recently used 2.1, so it's somewhat proven in battle.
Yeah.
So it's mostly just you know, bootstrap differences, API differences, that sort of thing.
And the
Okay.
GUI.
Yeah, and the GUI. So either GUI should work for them, the handcrafted GUI or
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
they'll probably stick with the handcrafted one rather than going to the new auto-generated one, I would think.
That's Intel internal only.
Okay, yeah. Well, they'll definitely stick with the handcrafted one then.
Yeah.
And Shiva, I think the SD code is 1.3. I think that's the one that we are releasing this week, or probably the end of this week. Do we want it to synchronize with the Ether release number or something, or?
No, I think that might have been an error on my part. Thanks for catching that.
Yeah, and that probably will be releasing by end of this week or just early next week. We'll be releasing that.
Great, thanks. I think what we'll need to do is, similar to what Joey did actually on the Volta call, is just put together a release matrix of what is going to be included and where are the major changes.
Right. Yeah,
Just
we'll
so
be
that we
adding the
can-
documentation part also, at least from the SD code part. But yeah, overall
Yeah.
on the Ether part also we need to add.
Yeah, as an ether artifact, what are all the different components, version numbers that are going to be incorporated into, 2.1 or whatever we end up calling it, and and same thing as we go forward for all the releases.
Okay.
What's included? What can people expect?
What's the target date for Ether 2.1?
Good question. I think, to me, this is largely driven by the availability of the short-term fixes and changes in Atomic's gRPC issues. So I turn that back to Sean and team and say, when do we think those are available, and can we start developing a timeline around that?
And which numbered items are those on Sean's list? Is that the one that Jordan has already done, as well as number 7?
Yeah. So numbers 2 and 7 are
Yeah.
the ones that are candidates. So change the southbound to have an alternative.
Yep.
So that doesn't involve deprecation or changes to other dependencies. It just changes the one place, and then changing the configuration store. And I think Sean, you also said number 1, limit the size of a transaction, was also underway as well. I don't know if the timeline on that fits.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, let's just pick those and say they're the priority ones.
Okay, 1, 2, and 7.
Yeah, let's go
All
for
right.
it.
All right, so oops. There we go. All right, I'll put a break in there and
So this release is going to be gated more by these features than by a timeline or kind of a cutoff date.
Mm-hmm.
yes, these are functionality. This is a functionality driven release as opposed to a schedule driven release.
Yeah, I mean, there's the modeling changes, are, I guess, significant in themselves that Ether 2.1 brings. I mean, maybe like these can be kind of these changes here, this 1, 2, 7, and 1, really can be invisible to a user. Like there'll be no perceptible difference. Do you want to hold on and wait for these? I mean, I think there's a reason for going with Ether 2.1 other than that.
Yeah, I think a case could be made to release 2.1 as is, potentially waiting for SD core. But just to get rid of, I mean, this 2.1 modeling changes have been sitting for 9 months. Basically they were done when we transitioned to Intel. So I think, there is a case we made for just closing out this 2.1 and being done with it and moving forward with 2.2 for these minor sort of, I guess I wouldn't call them minor. They're significant atomics fixes, but as Sean points out, they're not necessarily user facing. They're
isolated and internal. They don't show up externally. And I think it's really important to sort of build the foundation up layer by layer rather than having one giant release which has all sorts of modeling changes, functionality changes. The releases start to become unwieldy. So I'd rather set a good baseline, particularly for the more intrusive changes that are going to happen as a result of the Atomics gRPC upgrade.
Yeah, I would say I don't know. I mean, which are more intrusive, the modeling change, that's the visible part, and these ones aren't as visible. So yeah, it's debatable as to which is more intrusive.
Yeah, I think both are a compatibility issue. So the models, certainly there's a big compatibility thing there because I don't believe there's a way, and maybe Andy could chime in, to upgrade from 2.0 to 2.1 models. When you did this, well, I don't even know if we've ever done this, because are we still running Pronto on 2.0? Andy, do you know what our status is?
I think Pronto is still 2.0.
So yeah, we don't even have an update process necessarily
But we
to go
do,
from 2.0 to,
Scott.
do we?
Yeah,
You wrote this?
I wrote.
Okay.
I wrote a migration tool. So basically, you could bring up Aether 2.1 here, and it would support the 2.1 and 2.0 models. So you can continue with the 2.0 adapter and 2.0 configuration. Then you can run your migration tool, which will migrate all of that to 2.1 model, and from that point on, you run your system. You pointed at
Right.
the adapter for 2.1, and that's your configuration migrated.
But then
Okay.
is it not simpler to move the other changes around Atomics gRPC only from that model? Because otherwise we'd have to test it with both.
Well, they both run equally on it. It's the same infrastructure that runs regardless of which model version you're running. 2.0
Okay.
or 2.1.
Okay.
It's the same ONUS config.
Okay.
Yeah. No.
Well-
No. Having said that, I mean, having said that, I mean, if you're going to have a different Atomics version, you are going to do the migration. You are going to have to shut down and extract your 2.0 data, to a file. And then when you start up the system again with the new software, you would have to load in your 2.0 configuration from a file.
Maybe we should talk about how important this migration is. I mean, and Kajit on the call might be kind of in most concerned about this. I don't think we are. Well, I mean, I guess the Pronto sites, maybe they need to be considered, but ONF is not. I mean, that's really kind of Intel dealing with those right now. There are no other sites really that we have to worry about this migration issue that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I think it's cleanest if you don't have to if you can clean slate it with 2.1. And then, with the 2.1 models and the new Atomics, if you could clean slate all of this at once, it would save you some of this migration stuff. But I mean, that said, there is value in having our migration procedures tested on actual sites. Because that's something we'll need to do in the future.
on the Khajiit side of things, I mean, we have a few implementations. Most of them are very, very small, very lightly utilized. So if we had to do a full install and blow it away and redeploy our computer to do that, but soon we won't be able to do that.
It sounds like being able to do it in a modest size configuration, having the migration tools, there is some value to it, but the sooner we put this behind us, the better. Right, to your point, Scott, of have a clean slate so that new installations can start with 2.1 and essentially new configuration, new modeling.
So what would it take if we were to kind of release 2.1 and not hold for these atomics gRPC fixes, and then do a 2.1.1 or whatever, for the atomic stuff?
Yeah, if we did 2.1.1, and if that feature was in place where Sean described his sort of export import feature, then an upgrade would just be a matter of shutting down the old doing an export, shutting down the old atomics, then doing an import into the new one. That upgrade path would be relatively simple because there'd be no modeling change. Is that right, Sean?
Yeah, that's it, Scott. I mean, yeah, it probably would be the simplest approach.
So how much overhead is it for us to get a 2.1 out ASAP and get it behind us?
I think that comes down to how much testing you want to do, and maybe, well, Khajiit has been testing 2.1 or 2.0.
We're on 2.0.2.
Yeah. So I guess that would be the only concern, is that, I mean, other than us doing it at sort of an undisclosed internal demo, not a lot of people have been using 2.1. So if you want your bar for testing the release to be relatively high, then you have to have someone who does a test of 2.1, with the new models.
Yeah, I think the other piece to bring into there is one of the goals was to test the basic Ether private configurations with UPF. So essentially not an SD fabric configuration, fairly simple. And I'll put in air quotes, the productize the Ether private configurations that are supported and now tested. And there is a
private, do you mean standalone, Siva? I'm confused by
yes.
this private. Yeah. Well, I mean, Scott, on one hand, the more testing, the better, of course. But on the other hand, I don't know if more testing setup is magically going to appear. We're trying to spin up more testing and verification capabilities in ONF. That's, and the QA lab has been a problem. This is kind of still a recognized problem that we're trying to kind of resource and get beyond. We could rely on the Intel testing, I mean, the releases are tagged. People could still use 2.0 or 2.0.1, and maybe we'd get more eyes on and more testing of 2.1 if we were to get it out there. I mean, now, it's not in a position where others would be using it, I think. So it's not going to see any other airtime.
Yeah, I would like to see it go out, just because, like I say, those models have been sitting out there for like 9 months, and people are still using 2.0. So it'd be nice to just get it out there, get people transitioned to the new models, and just have that part done.
Yeah, and I should say that you know, any we haven't been backdating any changes we've made in honest config back to the 2.0 branch line. You know, so the updated atomic stores or any one of these functional changes that we're making here, you know, we're not putting in the effort to put them back into Ether 2.0.
Yeah, so bringing everything up to a current baseline makes sense. I think if the short-term fixes for Atomic's gRPC line up cleanly, great. And if they don't, we can do an Ether 2.1, 2.1.1.
It sounds perfect to me.
So then what
Okay.
would the timeline for 2.1 be, given this kind of thinking?
I think that's highly dependent on our ability to run through a comprehensive build and test cycle, and does depend on having, you know, standing up the configurations that we're going to test on. So in my view, I'd like to target January, end of January for this. But to be candid, I'm not sure we have a plan for that yet. I think that's a desire, not necessarily a plan.
Do we have a clearly defined test, set of test scenarios that we believe is the boundary point? You know, what's our minimum expectation?
I think the answer to that is yes. We do know the tests. We don't have a clear view as to whether those tests are successfully executing at this point. We need to put them onto simpler configurations to ensure they're functionally correct.
Okay.
So, Simon, I think you and I need to figure out how we're going to accelerate that and get that in place in order to get the 2.1 out the door in January.
Okay, I think that makes sense. I think January is a great target. Any other feedback on a January target?
Sounds good to me. One question on the 2.1 modeling. We'll consider that frozen at this point. I know there was some stuff Badri wanted to change about, stuff that was integers that needed to be strings so it could have leading zeros.
Yes, yeah, I think we are planning to work on that probably next week, but we didn't plan it to be part of 2.1, but like at least 1.3. But probably we can release it after that. So we were planning to work on that IMSI string to start with 0. So that was one of the major changes that we wanted. And probably some other tag strings and stuff needed to be integer.
Yeah, I think it would be really good to get those changes in before we release the 2.1.
Yeah.
So we're not freezing 2.1 models. We'll freeze after we have those changes in.
Yes, I would think that's better.
So let's make a note here in the 2.1 that it is going to include changes so that IMSIs can start with zeros.
Right.
And anything. Well, Badri, I guess you can fill in the list of various things.
I'll
you want
fill
to
it
be
in.
able to-
Yeah.
Yeah. And is that something that your team is taking on, Badri, or do you need support from Rock team with adapters?
Yeah, we're planning to take it up, but we probably need some help from you to just understand how it works. And stuff.
Yeah, I can provide adapter support as necessary.
Yeah, and I can help with Yang and all that as well, Badri.
And everything else is checked in. I mean, I guess I was under the impression that some of this 2.1 code was not checked in. I don't know where I got that impression, over the last 9 months. But I'm mistaken. Everything has been checked in for a period of time.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we recently used it.
Yes, I at least in the demo, we used the 2.1. It seemed to work fine with the latest SD code.
Yeah,
Well,
the
you'll-
only thing that'll change is what we're talking about with these leading zeros.
Right,
But you're
that's-
pulling all the code from the public repositories, not from private repositories.
Yep, from the public.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yeah.
That should make life a little simpler.
Are you going to, is this going to necessitate GUI update, this leading zero change?
Maybe
Um,
minor ones.
Okay, because that's probably the one thing we did not recently use was the legacy GUI.
Yeah, I mean it's so closely tied to the model, Scott, that I know it's working for the model as it is, and that model hasn't been changed in 9 months.
Right. Okay.
So I'm fairly confident that if battery's making small changes to 2 or 3 different attributes, it would be a pretty small change to the GUI.
Okay, good.
I
Okay.
mean, one of the things that's going to take a little bit of time, I mean, maybe a day or so, is that we've updated the tooling a bit, around generating open API specs and those kind of things, and generating code from open API specs. So, I expect there might be some, a little bit of work there, just to work with the updated tools. But I think that's a change well worth making to modernize it.
And are these updated tools, are they in the public repos or these are in private repos?
In the public.
Okay,
Yeah, so like the open API generator thing, it's under Honest Project Config Models.
okay, good.
Okay. It sounds like we have a plan. There's certainly some work to do to ensure we've got the resourcing and the substance behind executing the plan. But I'd say for now that this is the working plan for at least through the first quarter of this year. Kind of a
Also-
3-prong approach.
Well, so before we move on from the releases, and I know we're running out of time. So for the 2.1.1, is there a rough target timeline we're thinking of?
Two one one, that's with the atomic exchanges.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so for the first 3 items, 2, 7, and 1, yeah, I think we could aim for the end of January.
So that overlaps with the 2.1, but if you're on that timeline, let's just see how it goes, and maybe they're
Yeah. I think the thinking here is that if for some reason the atomics gRPC issues are delayed, we don't have to hold the major 2.1 release. Conversely, if it fits into 2.1, we put it in there. We don't need a 2.1.1.
Yeah, and maybe not all 3 will fit in. I mean, maybe
Right.
we can. I mean, because these are separable, and we can have them individually. And
Fair
I mean, part of it will depend on access to testing, scalable testing, and all that kind of thing as well.
Exactly.
okay. Good. And then what about
So-
3.0? So the one thing that's not mentioned here, so I've had some discussions with Guru about sort of a major drop of code coming after out of Pronto in the April timeframe or so, and that there's kind of a need for us to start looking at and scoping that work and planning for that. Is any of that thinking baked into this? I mean, is there or is that orthogonal?
It's the first time hearing of it, so it's orthogonal, but I'd left the door open for any other proposals. So anything else that is coming, whether from Intel or the community, should be candidates in here.
Will that release include compatibility with future OSs?
Future OS.
Future OS.
Yeah,
What specifically referring to?
Yeah, so basically Ether right now is pinned to 18.04, I think, right? There's a lot of dependencies and newer releases that are gonna have to be satisfied to be able to upgrade. So I think that's something we need to be thinking about.
I think the SD core part, at least still, we've tested it out on 20.4 and 22 also. Both seem to work fine. Yes, probably for everything else.
So what parts are pinned to 18.04?
Yeah,
I guess I wasn't
I
aware
think-
that anything was pinned to it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the rock functionality is
I can't think of any, but have you specifics?
yeah, we actually have a research ticket to go do some research to find out what dependencies exist. So I can give some follow-up on that once we are done with that ticket.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I mean, the rock really is made up of microservices all running on Alpine Linux 3.16.
Okay.
So is it
So,
maybe it's Ether in a box or something?
Yeah,
Andy's
that's-
area.
that's what I was gonna say. Ether in a box needs 1804 if you're running with OAI sim, because that is pinned to 1804 right now. Otherwise, that's the only dependency that I know on 1804.
Okay. Maybe that's where that came from on our side then. So I'll check on it.
Okay. Yeah, Dan, if you could just provide some information there, is there anything needed there, and if so, what needs to be done? I think we're still early enough in the planning stages that we want to find out what else needs to go into this.
So I think that there's a kind of the big question too is, what I talked about with Guru was a sync, and to try to really kind of scope and understand. And I think there were still some questions about what's going to get open sourced and what's not from the Intel side. I suspect, I don't know if there's anybody here that can comment on this, or we need to kind of take it back, or kind of, create a kind of a side working track to start to get this scoped and understood. Is what I'm making sense? Is what I'm saying making sense to anybody from the Intel team right now, or do we need to kind of?
Yeah, there is a plan for stuff to move out, around the end of the Pronto contract. But I don't think any of us can give any specifics on what's moving out.
Right. So that's, yeah, that aligns with my understanding. So I think, I guess the work item now is to start to try to get our hands around that and scope it. So there's kind of an understanding of what would get open sourced, and there's work clearly that Intel needs to do, have to figure that out. And then also for us to be prepared for that release, with the testing infrastructure and whatnot too. And it's probably a kind of an add-on to the 2.1 discussion about how we test and verify. But we want to try and stay ahead of this one, so that as the code is ready, we know where it's going to get dropped and how it's going to get tested and verified, and then cut into a public release. And I don't know if that's 3.0 or what it's called or whatnot, but we need to start.
Yeah, I put the question mark behind it. I didn't want to have numbering debates today.
Yeah, right. That's not the point. But it's really, this one's driven by time, I believe. We really should be thinking about, I believe, an April like timeline, and working towards that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we do have to work at figuring out what that content would be if through whatever Intel is open sourcing.
At least from the Pronto SD code, there are some changes that are needed for this Pronto demo that we are planning to do, and that might get released. But that doesn't seem like a big chunk, like you were saying, Timon. Probably that's something else which is getting open source.
Yeah, I mean, I
That's
think
the
from the rock. Also, I would say from the rock perspective, there is a new GUI, for the rock, and maybe that'll get open sourced. And if it was, there wouldn't be a big chunk of work involved. I mean, there'd be a different look and feel, but I think it wouldn't be huge. And that's if it gets released.
Mhm.
Scott, can you think of any others?
Yeah, I mean, you know, we would have to, it's hard for me to remember what all's in private repos and what isn't, but I think, you know, maybe some build process related stuff. I'm not sure. Most of that may be going into public. We kind of ended up with a split configuration where some stuff happens internally, some happens externally. So but I think it really falls on us to do an inventory internally, see what's going out. You know, we also have to see who we might have to ask permission or get security approvals or quality approvals. There can be a number of things that could factor into our decision of what goes out.
Okay. Let me hold discussion there, since we're really getting towards the top of the hour, and I do want to propose a significant change, and that's go from biweekly to weekly meetings. And part of the rationale for that is I think we've got a combination of strategic issues with releases, what's in them, what configurations are we going to support and features, as well as operational topics, what problems, bugs, deployment status, etc. Which, of course, on a day like today doesn't get any time. And I think waiting a full 2 weeks makes the cadence that much slower. So what I'm proposing is we go to weekly, but we'll actually start each weekly meeting alternating between strategic and operational, and we can come back and visit anything hot that happens in the other area. Or give people back some time as needed. But I think in order to get ourselves to a point where we can get these releases out the door, these major changes, and pull things forward, we're going to need to work at a slightly faster cadence. Can any opinions, thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's fine with me.
Okay.
I think it makes a lot of sense, especially given the release cadence that we're talking about now through this April drop and whatnot.
Yeah, all the coordinates will be the same. So same Zoom number, same Zoom link, same document, same time every week. Hopefully, this makes it a little easier on everybody's calendars as well, because it's more regular and easily planned for. Okay. Unless there's any severe opposition, we'll be going next week, same time. We'll start with operational issues, so we'll look for Amol and others to be adding in topics around how we're doing there, and then we can circle back to any of the gaps in the strategic planning that we need to, if time permits. All right. With that, I'd like to close it today. We're pretty close to on time. Thank you very much to everybody. Happy New Year to you all. I'm looking forward to what looks like it's going to be a busy first quarter. But thanks for all the work last year, especially late last year, to get us in a position where we can start the year running. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thank you. Bye,
Bye.
all.
Bye, thanks.